Have you seen this? The Aegis Sail adventure that was scuttled due to a media sea change, and we consider what might have been had the cultural winds not shifted.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
Well, let me get us in the mood. A British tar is a soaring soul, as free as a mountain bird. His energetic fist should be ready to resist a dictatorial word. Take it, Tim!
Oi, why aren't you just shouting the words and fighting the bird and shouting for England?
You clearly work in the bowels of the ship.
You palmy officer.
You don't dine with the lieutenants.
No, I dine with the right tenants.
I dine with David Tennant.
There, you got a straight intro for once. Not me going like, hey, this movie sucks and has Lindsay Lohan in it.
Thank God.
Right.
It is exciting to talk about something really cool. And, the time truly has come.
I'm impressed that we've done, 200 episodes and we've indulged all of my trash media fixations, but we haven't actually done any of the movies that you like.
Well, like dad movies?
Well, yeah, I mean, you are your father's daughter.
This really is like a perfect dad movie.
It is, because it exists, like I said, of a certain cultural zeitgeist that is just out of step with, I think, current sensibilities, which is unfortunate because Master and Commander, the far side of the world, unfortunately not related to the Gary Larson cartoon, or comic.
Russell Crowe plays a cow that can use tools.
Paul Bettany is a Neanderthal with just a line for eyes. But yeah, the crazy thing, the wacky thing about this Master and Commander movie is that it depicts a character who is not really flawed and damaged. I think that the kind of cultural zeitgeist as of late, as of sometime around, I don't know, the end of 2001, where America kind of got scared and shifty and just kind of lost all its principles. This is about a principled character who is good at their job and works hard to achieve success. And I think that just with just everything, with, rising costs of living, several once in a lifetime financial meltdowns, people getting away with murder, that sort of thing. A lot of room for hope has been lost out of media. So to have your movie's protagonist be someone who is skilled and successful and affects meaningful change, I think that audiences kind of don't go for that because there's no, just the notion of in your own life being able to have honor and dignity and a positive impact on the world is just I can't even relate to this anymore. So that, I feel like in a way that kind of undercuts the ultimately optimistic tone of Master and Commander. What do you think, Jen? That's all I have to say. You take it away. You take it from here.
Okay, I'll see you, Tim.
All right. Yep.
Have a good night.
I'm setting my headphones down now.
Take the first watch. I think that at the time, this movie, this movie's 20 years old, which...
this is from, 2003?
2003.
Yeah.
And I don't usually dwell on that kind of shit. In fact, I get a little irritated when people are like, oh my God, do you realize this one movie came out 10 years ago or whatever? It's yeah, time moves forward. What else is new? But maybe
it's pretty unpleasant.
But maybe because this movie was specifically meaningful to me because I really loved it at the time and I still love it. I've seen it like 50,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
That hits differently. To consider the time it has passed since Master and Commander hit the theaters and was a moderate success, but not enough to guarantee the franchise that Fox and Tom Rothman, who is the executive who really pushed this project, were hoping for. And 2003 was really a different time. It feels like a lifetime ago. And like, yeah, it was in that post 9/11 shell shock period. But also I remember the culture feeling like just really, everything was like kind of rah, fuck all y'all, like, we will rise again to fuck shit up. And this film is a little more thoughtful than that. And I remember at the time, it felt a little bit old-fashioned. But
right, yeah. If anything, the movie's a little out of place, in that it does have old-fashioned values, like things of fortitude and honor and dignity being tangible things that can affect your life rather than the sort of capriciousness of larger forces beyond yourself, where it's like, yep, what can you do? I tried my best, and someone just said, we need to let 20% of you go.
Yeah, and tradition not being a bad thing.
Right, yeah.
An interesting comparison to make is this movie and one of my favorite television shows, The Terror, the first season.
Oh, yeah.
They're somewhat separated in time because this takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, 1805. The Franklin
oceans have become battlefields, yes.
Yes. The Franklin expedition was more like mid-19th century, as if I recall correctly. But the institution concerned was still pretty much the same, the British Navy. And it's really interesting to look at a fairly optimistic treatment of the material like this and a really dark supernatural take on British naval expeditions, like first season of The Terror.
Yeah.
But I really love both.
Well, yeah, it's because they don't have any pesky women in them, and, they're about boys going on adventures, which is Jen's favorite genre of movie.
Well, this is a very character-driven movie because, it's literally about the character of the men on this fucking boat.
Yes.
And the best movies to me are the ones where the characters motivate the story and the themes of the film. That is what makes a movie truly rich and worth experiencing. And also it's kind of a rare experience because creating these kinds of characters is really fucking difficult. Not a lot of people are good at it. And, Tim kicked off by mentioning how out of place this movie kind of feels now. It certainly does. Like I said, it didn't... They didn't get the franchise they wanted out of it. There is apparently a sequel in development, and it's something which Russell Crowe has actually pushed for on social media. In fact, he was like, email Tom Rothman at Fox and, let him know that you want to see another Master Commander film. As Tim was saying, like, it's a movie that's out of place, and this film coming out in 2003, people recognize the quality. It was nominated for a passel of Oscars. It only won two very well-deserved Oscars, in my opinion.
Please tell me one of them was sound design.
Yes.
Okay, because that is well-earned.
Yes, because otherwise, like, they would have been fucking robbed, because the sound design in this movie is incredible, but I will get to that, because I would like to effuse about it at length.
Yeah, if you care about sound design, this is definitely a movie to... Well, I don't want to say watch... a movie to listen to.
Just watch it once and enjoy it, and then the next time put it on and then just close your eyes and just groove on the sound.
Right, yeah.
But this movie did get a lot of Oscar nominations, but unfortunately it was kind of shut out by another kind of fairly optimistic movie about heroes, Return of the King. the Lord of the Rings film.
That was a popular movie, yeah.
Yeah. And doesn't it feel weird to look back on the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Because that is starting to feel like very much, and yeah, I know it's been 20 fucking years, but
yeah.
Sometimes time is a blur, and you're like, whoa, that was 20 years ago? Like, what?
Yeah. I don't know if you were there, but I mean, I remember seeing, all three of them back to back to back at the Cinerama Dome.
Oh, I remember that screening, and I actually had the option, because I'm pretty sure like most of my friends went to that screening.
Well, yeah.
And I was like, that sounds cool, but I just know that I will get like a little too tired for that. But props to the people who did go, because that's an epic piece of movie going.
Sure is. Yeah, I guess to be up against Lord of the Rings is one of those things where you could never anticipate, just a juggernaut like that being your opposition.
Yeah, and this movie was very well reviewed. Like I said, moderate success. I think because of the price tag, this cost about $150 million to make. Obviously, a very complex production. I mean, I believe they shot in Australia. They shot in Baja, California, because like Fox had a facility down there, working in and around the water. Tons of visual effects.
Yeah, a historical action movie shot on water. Like, when is that not expensive?
Yeah, and with attention to detail for the costuming and the production design, which is really like second to none. And I'm not really an expert in I'm not really an expert on like how accurate this stuff is, but I believe a lot of care and attention was put into the visual aspects just to make it look like really period.
Yeah. Accurate or not, that it looks legitimate, that it's convincing. That's the important part. Yeah,
and kind of funny. This movie came out. I saw it in theaters. I loved it, and then around the same time, people wouldn't shut up about this fucking Pirates of the Caribbean movie that had been out, but was like, at that time it was like in the dollar theaters or whatever. And I was like, okay, like I'll go see this because like I guess everyone else has seen it.
Yeah.
Now, seeing Pirates of the Caribbean after Master and Commander, like the costumes in Pirates of the Caribbean look like they came from like a fucking Spirit Halloween store. Like, because
it's a different kind of movie. Yeah.
What's the guy that actor from Coupling who's in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie?
Oh, I don't remember his name, but yeah, he's Steve. I don't know what's his name.
And he's like a British naval officer. And if you were to put him next to Russell Crowe in his like, captain's uniform for Master and Commander, the difference is just absolutely hilarious.
Right, yeah. It's like, you idiots, you've captured their stunt doubles.
Yeah. And I love that they don't really stint on any period detail, including the roughly blousy shirt that Russell Crowe is wearing while the ship is becalmed, because everybody is like stripped down as much as they could because it's miserably hot. And he calls Hullum into his quarters to talk to him, and he just faces off with him in this like poet shirt with like ruffles on the collar, which is like cut like halfway down his chest. And I was like, Russell Crowe like sells that. Like,
yeah,
you're not gonna laugh at his shirt.
Take that, Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah. Some guys can pull it off, some guys can't.
Yeah, but I mean, and he's incredible in the movie. It's one of my favorite Russell Crowe performances, and it reminds me of why I'm like such a big fan of him as a leading man. And he's just perfect for the role because he's like so commanding a presence.
He's mastering and commanding, yeah.
Yeah.
So the 1-2 punch of that in LA Confidential, and Jen's like sold.
Absolutely. And then he made The Mummy with Tom Cruise, and I was like, all right.
Well, I'm gonna go watch Master and Commander again.
Yeah, it's a job, I guess. Speaking of movies, they thought they were gonna get a franchise out of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, considering that just like the shambling corpse that is like the DC whatever cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Like, just put a bullet in it and try Master and Commander again. Like, that was a moderate success rather than people just, like, gritting their teeth over what's the next failure. I saw, there's a Reddit thread that was like, you can make, you could have a documentary of, like, all the failed Superman projects alone, like, going back to, like, Superman Lives, the one
that was going to have Nicolas Cage.
Right, yeah. The Kevin Smith, Tim Burton thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and another way in which this movie feels like completely out of step with current movie making, it has a lot to do with, like, the current franchise fatigue. Mm-hmm. This movie feels diametrically opposed to the kind of thing that they're spending more than $150 million a pop on. Because this is, like, a thoughtful movie with, like, well-considered themes, an excellent ensemble, as well as, like, care and attention paid to what's on the screen. And then you put it... And there is, like... I know for a fact that there's a lot of CG in this movie, but it's not, like, obtrusive. I can only think of
like,
it...
Shark Boy and Lava Girl levels of CG. Which,
and
I don't know if anyone knows that meme, but that's been my, like, perception of Marvel movies since. Like, the scales fell from my eyes.
Yeah, or like, what was that one with Angelina Jolie, The Eternals or whatever?
Right, yeah. Like,
that just looked like shit. And this, I can specifically think of a couple of shots in the movie where you're like, oh yeah, that's like, that's very obviously like,
yeah,
green
the flying
screen.
shark, yeah.
the
Sharknado.
The only reason I noticed those shots is because I've seen the movie so many fucking times. Like,
right, yeah.
All the other times I watched it, I was so involved in the story that I wasn't sitting there going like, oh yeah, like Paul Bettany is just on fucking, he's standing on a little platform pretending he's in the Galapagos Islands. I see what you're doing, Paul Bettany.
That's so
and
phony.
Speaking of, this is pre-Marvel Paul Bettany, before he was consigned to life playing
as a magenta
Jarvis
robot.
Vision, yeah. Ugh, man.
Yeah, why can't he be getting more roles like that in Dogville? He plays the incel nice guy.
Yeah, like, and you know what? They almost. And
that's
had
a good role because it still bothers me. Like, seeing him, I'm like, oh, that guy. But, he really embodied the role. Good for him.
They could have had like a Dogville franchise, because they did Dogville and then they did Manderley with Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yeah,
there wasn't a third movie in that universe though. It's weird. It couldn't have cost that much to produce.
No. Well, I mean, the third movie was Antichrist, and they're like, Lars, we need a hit with this, otherwise you're done.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Antichrist was just an unqualified success.
Right, yeah, it is exactly what you want. And thinking about Dogville and Lars, like, that's the thing, is that, like, Lars will do something once, and you'll be like, oh my god, that's so powerful. And then he'll do it again, and you're like, come the fuck on.
He likes trolling.
Right, yeah. So he
trolls relentlessly.
He can overplay his hands. I think I mentioned in our Lars von Trier episode.
Yes, but
yeah. So we're talking about CG, Paul Bettany not really being on the Galapagos Islands. That's cheat.
They did shoot in the actual Galapagos, and this was I think the first feature film ever to shoot there. Which is understandable because that's a protected area because of its very unique and, fragile ecosystem. And I don't know how they swung getting the permission to do it, but they did, because you see you see the marine iguanas and the frigate birds and, whatever the fuck that flightless cormorant is. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool.
Not quite a penguin, not quite a seagull.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, these days, there's no way they would have gone all the way down to the Galapagos Islands. They would have been like, "Fuck it, let's just."
Yeah, it's like, do we have any like? Yeah, do we have any like assets from like the Unity store that we can just use?
It's just that
that
one
loaf.
cat, the loaf cat, the black and white loaf cat. Yes.
That's an undiscovered species of loaf.
Yeah. Like, Maturin discovers the cat loaf and, like, also the CG capybara.
It's some kind of cat, but without any limbs. It's a legless cat.
2 heretofore undiscovered species in one day. There,
Jen, you gotta do like a mashup then of like him looking through the spyglass and then the cat showing up.
Oh my god. Yes. Yes. Okay, we are 100% gonna do that. Right. Oh fuck, I love it so much because I love this movie so much.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's an optimistic movie. It is one where you have strong characters achieving their goals, which, you know, if you're anyone who lives in the world and goes to see this movie, you're like, this is completely unrealistic. Like, you have a guy in charge who's competent and, like, conscientious.
Yes.
He has a friend, which already you're like, that's weird.
Every Redditor is like, come on.
Yeah.
No way.
2 guys who, like, hang out and enjoy each other's company. Like, I mean, I do a podcast with one person, but I mean, I don't even like her that much.
And we're not friends. Like, come on.
No. So,
although I would, oh man, like, can you imagine if you pulled Redditors on the character of Hollum?
That's a good question. Well, what would you say to that, Jen?
We have to talk about
Hollum. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Which one's Hollum?
The midshipman who gets labeled the Jonah.
Oh, my spirit animal.
That is a really, really poignant character.
Right, because this movie, because we haven't described anything about the plot or the story at all. It is, you know, like I mentioned, a historical action adventure movie, and it is about the Age of Sail. It hits all the notes. It has to deal with ship to ship combat, like in Traveler. It has to deal with, not so much piracy, but
privateers.
Privateers. You know, with the letter of marque. It's, you know, the Napoleonic Wars. It has to deal with
French people. Gross.
Yeah, French people, the worst. Just gross. Yeah, it is. You know, navigation, dealing with weather, dealing with, you know, human resources issues.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of topics that go into running a ship. It isn't just shooting cannons at the other guy and then waiting for him to sink. There's a lot more to it. And to its credit, the movie covers all of the highlights of what you would want out of an Age of Sail movie.
Yes.
So and amongst those things is one of the characters who gets just labeled as a Jonah, as just sort of this like bad omen.
Yeah. Scapegoated.
Yeah, he becomes the scapegoat because they have, and there are like a lot of great characters in this, and each of them have, you know, their own, you know, very poignant journeys.
Yes.
And amongst them, you know, there's the regular, you know, rough and tumble crew, just, you know, a bunch of just awful, uneducated, you know, able seamen, whatever.
Probably half of whom were
fodder.
like. Probably like half of whom were press ganged into like being in the fucking British Navy.
Right, yeah.
Which is something which Maturin brings up later in the movie because, and that's Paul Bettany's character, Dr. Maturin, kind of the yin to Aubrey's yang.
Yeah, he's the Commander Data to Captain Picard. I mean, I guess.
2 great characters.
Right.
Like, Maturin mentions that because they're dealing with some ill feeling on the ship, and Captain Aubrey is kind of, he knows he has to have this one guy flogged, and he kind of feels bad about it. And Maturin points out, you know, like, what do you expect from men who've been, like, pressed from their homes? They're, like, forced to serve on the ship. They're, like, confined for months on end. But he's kind of Maturin is a little more subversive because he's not He's not a British naval man like everyone else he's surrounded with.
Yeah, he's not like dyed in the wool king and country types.
And thus he acts as a pretty good conduit for the audience, because this movie also does a great job of making a lot of the nautical shit clear to like non-sailors.
That is the amazing thing about this. I'm like, oh, like they're telling me what's going on, and like I can clearly see what's happening, and I know what the stakes are.
And they're not doing it in a stupid ass clunky way.
Right, yeah.
Like that is really difficult. And
I was
with
amazed
material
too that,
like this.
Yeah.
Like have you looked at the books these are based on?
I can't read, Jen.
I can barely read. And sure enough, I tried reading one or two of the books that that this movie was. Actually, this movie I think was kind of clutched together from 3 different novels.
Well, yeah, it definitely took the highlights of each of them.
Right. And people love these books. And I'm not maligning the books. I'm just saying that I'm 100% too stupid to appreciate these books. Because you want to talk about like dense, like nautical detail. Well, like every other sentence is a word where you're just like, I have no idea what the fuck that means. Like I don't even have like a ballpark understanding of where this word comes from.
I don't know. I mean, you must have had to have read Moby Dick in high school, and that starts with, notoriously like, 100 pages of whaling background.
I've never read Moby Dick, Tim. I keep telling you, I'm
don't
too stupid.
Garbage.
I mean, I know there's a whole chapter where he just like holds forth about whales, which to
Yeah,
Melville are clearly some kind of fish.
Probably, I don't know.
Also, it's homoerotic. You know what? I should read it.
Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah. More boy adventures that Jen loves. And the other thing that, speaking of Moby Dick, is that it has been not a great adventure for, Russell Crowe and his crew of the Surprise, because they've been tasked with sinking or capturing one of those lousy French vessels.
The Acheron.
Some piece of shit called the Acheron. And they've been after it, and they've missed it 2 or 3 times already. So I can understand as part of the crew getting pretty restless about it, and then on top of that, just having bad weather befall them. And there's a point where one of the officers is scapegoated with like he's the reason that we've had this run of bad luck. And part of that is because he's an officer, but he's not an authority. He's not a commander. And even still, like he gets, well, I wouldn't say he gets reprimanded, by, Russell Crowe's captain character. He gets help from him where he's like, look, you have to act like you're in charge. Like it isn't about being friends with them. It's about, being their leader.
And it's such a great scene. And
yeah,
I love the way that this character is set up because, and first of all, like the setup for the movie is great. We haven't even talked about how the movie opens, which is one of the biggest selling points for me.
It's a great opening action scene, yeah.
Well, before that, because, okay, you know how, like, you and I talk a lot about how in the movie Alien, the movie starts off not with action,
yeah,
like some movies might default to, but just like, here we are on the Nostromo. This is what it's like to be on this ship. This is all, like, atmosphere. Now, and it is a goddamn shame that probably
Alien wasn't more popular, yeah.
Well, it's it's a goddamn shame that most of you probably haven't seen Master and Commander in the big screen. If you have the opportunity to see it in a really good screening room, you like move heaven and earth to go, because I've seen it in regular theaters, and I've also seen it in a top flight screening room at my job, where very loving care was given to every aspect of presentation, because the screening room was looked after by nerds who knew exactly what the fuck they were doing. The opening of this movie in a good theater is sublime, because it not just through the use of the visuals, but also through incredible sound design, it puts you on the HMS Surprise. Like, you will feel like you are within the ship itself. The creaking timbers, the bells, the wind, the water.
Footsteps of men on different decks. You can like hear the sounds of action all around you, of people moving to their stations.
Incredible. And it starts off very slowly. It's the ship in kind of a quiescent time. It's late. Most of the men are in their hammocks sleeping. We see individual people, like, just, the watch, like, just moving slowly and quietly, like, and the sound of the environment around the ship as it like moves through the water. I can't sell this hard enough. It's maybe one of my favorite openings to any movie ever.
I mean, that you broke out quiescent, I think, sells it. Holy shit!
You think I'd be able to read those fucking Patrick O'Brian books, but no, I'm too dumb. Like,
right.
I'm a movie person. That's as intellectual as I get.
They don't involve reading.
Yeah, I do. Like, when that famous now famous title screen comes up, April 1805. I'm just like, what the fuck is this? I can't read this shit. And the whole reason we're talking about this movie is because a guy's tattoo has gone viral. He has the title card tattooed on his back, and like at least 3 people sent it to me because they know how much I love the fucking movie. It's a good
dope.
tattoo.
Yeah, but yeah, so it starts by setting the mood, like in Alien, of like, this is what it's like just being on a ship.
And it's such a balls. I'm sorry, I keep effusing, but it's such a ballsy way to open your movie, because like so many. And this was something which was told to us, like, when I was doing my screenwriting concentration at UCLA. It's like, you got to get the story moving inside like the first 7 pages, and they've probably moved it up since then. It's probably like, no, you got to get hearts pounding like from the moment the movie starts, and instead this is like we're putting you into 1805 on like a completely alien environment to like most of us.
Yeah, because you have to understand the parameters that you're living in. You're like, this is, there are going to be, sails and ropes and, men scurrying about. There's going to be...
No elbow room.
Yeah, no elbow room. Your bed is a hammock, just like shoulder to shoulder with some other just guy who got press ganged into this.
Yeah.
You'll be navigating by candlelight, looking through telescopes where the glass isn't quite so great.
Oh, I love those. I love those POV shots through like the 1800s lenses.
Oh yeah, yeah, because that's
so good.
Well, that's how they get the story starting off, and this is one of the things that I like too about the French Connection in particular. Is it is a story started from a dead stop, where it is a guy on whatever watch it is, scanning the horizon with a spyglass, maybe sees a ship. Like, that's enough to set things in motion. And
which also tells you immediately about that character, because Hallam is the one who spots what he thinks is a sail. Mm-hmm. But his fellow midshipmen are like, should we beat to quarters? Go to battle readiness or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And he's indecisive. He's like, I don't know. Like, did I actually see a sail? Like, shit. What? And it's like, okay. Like,
and the guy's like, well, either you did or you didn't. You have to make the call.
Yeah, but he just doesn't have the confidence to move decisively, and it's the other midshipman who says, "We shall beat to quarters," and then you get the drums going, and then everybody's
it's like, oh shit, I'm up, yeah, I'm awake, I'll do it.
So good.
Yeah, that's when you hear all the commotion of the ship, which is really rallying, just in how again with the sound design really putting you there in the scene, because you hear all the different kinds of action, and you see what's going on, where it is everyone has their own job to do. It isn't just everyone's just grab a rope, grab a gun, I don't know, like people have shit to do, and you kind of get a glimpse of all the different things that are going on, even things like the surgeon preparing, where it's like, all right, I'm gonna get some wounded in, so I need to get to my station so that when things start happening, I'm prepared. You get a sense of all those different dozens of little jobs that all go on to make this thing work.
Yeah, and then you also get the contrast between this this crew, which is, up to British naval standards, and then the way they have to pretend to not be British Navy sailors, like later in the film. They have to act like whalers, like, handle the sails like in a lubberly way, like don't, like not like just
right,
snap,
yeah,
snap,
stay on course but not too close.
Yeah,
fly
exactly.
casual.
Thank you, Pippin.
Right. Yeah,
Fool
Pippin's
of a
in
toque.
this. Right. He doesn't have much character development, which is unfortunate, but to star in, or at least be featured in, two of the biggest movies of that year, that's not bad.
Yeah, he's doing all right for himself, I would hope.
Right. So let's see. So we've got the intro of what happens, and Russell Crowe on deck does see the cannon fire of the other ship coming in, and if you know enough about movies, like they get absolutely wrecked at the beginning of this. They're outclassed, literally, by this French frigate. It has all the new bells and whistles. It has longer guns. It has
it's bigger.
It's bigger. It has a thicker hull. It was built in America when that used to mean something.
Proudly made in America.
Yeah, and that the rest of the movie from then on is going to be this adversarial, relationship with them, or not relationship, this adversarial, fight between them and the French ship, where they're the underdog, and they're going to have to be more bold and clever and calculating in order to beat this ship that is way beyond their means.
Well, thank God they're being commanded by a lucky Jack.
Yeah, lucky for them. And the initial attack sets a lot of character stuff. Jeez, Tim, great. In motion.
I just think it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting film.
Right, yeah. It sets a lot of character motivations going. It makes stuff go. Because you have Paul Bettany's character, like there's a guy who takes a traumatic head wound.
Oh yeah.
Where he like skull's cracked or whatever, and like I don't know if he's gonna live.
Skull fracture.
Right, yeah. But later on,
which is like, damn, like this is 1805. You were fucked, dude.
Right, yeah. And that it is a losing proposition, but Paul Bettany's doctor's like, still, well, gotta give it a go. And he repairs it with he patches his skull with a coin.
Yeah.
That's wild. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We just gotta try. And that kind of is the tone of the movie, because it is saying, we can't just shirk from our responsibilities. We can't just be like, yeah, no, Acheron's got our ass. Like, we can't go after them. It's like, well, if you want to capture the Acheron, you're going to have to be clever about this.
Yeah, and it's also a really interesting. Oh, God damn it!
Yeah, see, now you're doing it. Put a point in that swear jar.
I love the way that they contrast Maturin with Aubrey, because you have in the character of Aubrey like a very he is a traditional commander in a way. Not a martinet like you might expect.
I know, that's what I was thinking.
He has compassion for his men and is well liked, but he's very much like the embodiment of like the ideal British naval officer. And then Maturin, not being from that milieu, is like more at one point Aubrey Albert calls him an anarchist. Because he's speaking in very subversive terms about their employer, the British Navy. Mm-hmm. And you think that Maturin is kind of going to be... he and Aubrey are very great friends, and their friendship really comes through, but there's a clash between Aubrey's traditionalism and, kind of Maturin's slight defiance. But as the movie goes on, you come to realize that they're not going to make an adversary or a villain out of Maturin. It's like, oh wait, this guy has something to offer as well, in spite of not being a part of this kind of hidebound institution. Like,
Yeah, he was fighting for like something that he believed in, or at least he had a purpose, even if the purpose was just like fuck the French.
yeah, and this was like the
Did he
tail
just give a
end.
stirring speech on that subject? But go ahead.
Yeah, this was the tail end of the Enlightenment, and Maturin is very much of that kind of cultural moment because he's a naturalist and he's interested in science, and his main concern is knowledge, like expanding knowledge and learning. But he also has a little bit of that kind of romantic sort of resistance to authority. I mean, not enough that he's going to get like keelhauled or anything, but he's very much a foil to the character of Aubrey, and he is kind of like the man of the new century. And in a strange way, like what you end up with in kind of like this crucible of like seafaring warfare is in the character of Lord Blakeney, like the young up and coming off, like very young, like this literal child soldier.
Right.
You have the synthesis of Aubrey and Maturin, because Blakeney has the natural leadership qualities of Aubrey, but he also has the curiosity and intelligence of Maturin.
Ah, the man for a new century.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that it's a story about queer parenting.
It's about how you've raised with two dads.
Yeah, two dads raise a smart and brave and successful son. That is my queer reading of Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World.
All right.
I'm all about queer readings this week because I also did, I was on the Soundtracker podcast and I also put together a queer reading of the film Electric Dreams.
Okay. The computer is gay?
Yes, you could frame it as...
Oh, because he loves it. Yeah.
Because he's a socially isolated outsider, like looking at this idealized heterosexual relationship, which he wants for himself but cannot achieve.
Ah, that is some incredible bullshit. You really spun this convincing argument out of nothing. That's great.
I'm gonna take it to Tumblr where it will be properly appreciated.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that I like that you just spun this out of a whole cloth.
I know, but I'm saying they love that shit on Tumblr.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Anyway, now we're going to talk about Aubrey Maturin Slash.
Okay. Right. So I obviously did not remember the names of any of the characters.
I can help you with that.
All right. The child that these two men are raising together in love on a boat. Who are you talking about?
They're so cute. They play violin together.
Yeah.
Violin and cello.
They're
Lord
in a band.
Blakeney, the little kid who loses his arm.
Okay, because that is so poignant. Because that's one of the things that happens in the first scene too. The where they are attacked by the French vessel, where he takes some like wooden shrapnel into his arm, and he's like, no big deal. It's broken. But the kid is like, well, he's a child, so he's scared. Mm-hmm. And then things get worse, and he loses his arm.
Yeah,
a fucking kid.
Yeah, he puts on a brave face for the captain, who actually comes to see him and gives him a book about Lord Nelson to read and blah blah blah.
And that is so touching too.
Yeah, and then there's a moment where he's talking to Calamy, the other young midshipman, who later in the film gets a promotion to lieutenant, a brief promotion to lieutenant. Yeah. And they have and Blakeney asks him, like, is it true that when they sew you up after you're dead, because they sew them in like canvas for sails when they put them over the side when they're dead. He says, is it true that they put the last stitch through your nose? Yeah,
because this little kid is really scared of dying. Like, he had been, just on a ship this whole time. Then they get attacked. Then he gets injured. Then he loses an arm, and he's not in a good way. So And, he's a scared little kid.
Well, and then one thing I noticed is that immediately after that conversation, there's a cut, and you see, like a close up of Blakeney like lying down, kind of like in cool light. And for a moment, it's like, wait, did he fucking die from the wooden shrapnel? And then, and no, like they're taking him to the doctor because they're going to amputate his fucking arm. Yeah. And this poor kid, and like the surgery in this movie is like fucking gnarly.
It's what you would expect for the 1800s.
Yeah, like, and
at sea.
And what I kept thinking, rewatching this, was like, did they do, did they sanitize shit back then? Because there was that. Have you heard the story? Have you heard the story that there was that one doctor who was like an obstetrician or something, and he's like, hey, I've noticed that we get fewer maternal deaths if you wash your hands before you deliver these kids. Like, we're getting less instances of puerperal fever and blah blah. And all the other doctors are like, are you saying we got dirty hands?
Yeah.
What the fuck
is
dude?
Wrong with you? Yeah.
Like, you can't fucking say that shit to us. And so he was like kind of ostracized by his colleagues, and it took many more decades before people were like, oh yeah, like if you wash your hands, like the patient might not just immediately die of sepsis.
Yeah, and and then he was committed to a mental institution where he died of an infection. So at the end he's just like, you motherfuckers.
Yeah, like nobody's washing their damn hands.
Right. Well, I mean, they must have been aware of it, because later on when Dr. Paul Bettany, he takes a shot, and they're like, well, there's cloth embedded in the wound, and like that's going to disintegrate and fester.
Yes.
So we need to get it out. So they must have some idea of it. And I mean, yeah, it's the kid got hit with splinters of wood, and with all the other I'm sure sanitary conditions didn't help any of that. So yeah, he lost an arm, and that's so sad to see. The little kid get so grievously injured like that. Which is why it is so poignant too when Russell Crowe brings, because like the kid is not really action ready at this point. He's kind of going to be sidelined in his career. You know that, but he brings him a book of stories about Lord Nelson, who is far and above the naval hero of the British Empire.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, I hear that you knew Lord Nelson, and he did. And the kid like pressed him for information, but he demurs, and he's like, just read the book. And he opens it, and then on like the opening page is a picture of Lord Nelson missing an arm.
That's right.
Yeah.
And yet that guy still crushed pussy.
Of course he did. He's a military hero. Like, that was the thing. And that's the other thing too, that you notice a lot of the time, this it was de rigueur around World War I still to have like scars, to have like a facial scar, or be missing an eye or something, because it's like, I've been out in the action. Tons of just like everyone has some kind of facial scar on this trip.
Oh yeah, like the really hot first lieutenant, Mr. Pullings.
Right. Yeah, or like even the captain, like he's got something going on with his ear, like kid's short an arm. There's a guy with like, you can see like the stitches across like the bridge of his nose. Yes. And then these guys have seen some shit.
Yeah, and then the brain surgery patient. Yeah. Who well now I'm forgetting his name.
I'm gonna call him Hold Fast.
Yes. You might have seen the screen cap on the internet, the Hold Fast tattoos on his knuckles. The surgery is a success up to a point. Like
it gets a little loopy thereafter.
Yeah, as he's recuperating, his computer's like, he hasn't said anything yet, and it's like, God knows like what part of the human brain that Maturin poked when he was putting that coin in place. Like, it's remarkable.
Or that he had to scoop out with a sharpened piece of silverware.
And the touches of humor in this movie are just great too. That's another very humorous scene, is the crew just like watching this surgery happening, like on the deck, just like open mouthed, and they're like, is that his brains? And he's like, no, that's dried blood. These are his brains. It's like, ugh. And the patient does
when
live,
you see it. Yeah.
but then he becomes like kind of a weird, savant and like soothsayer, because
he's the one who starts talking about a Jonah.
Yeah, he's the one who really starts pushing the Jonah narrative, because he's like, growling out like biblical quotes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But hey, like for 1805 surgery, and then later in the movie when Maturin has to operate on himself.
Yeah.
Like
you'll recall that that Russian at the Antarctic station who had to do his own appendectomy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the moment when you realize like this guy isn't just like a like a counterpart to Aubrey. Like he is also a fucking badass.
Right. Well, that's the kid who lost an arm. That's he kind of becomes his prodigy after that, where he's like, oh, maybe it could be a naturalist like you, but not like a naturalist, like a fighting naturalist.
It's so cute.
It is, yeah. And it's cute too that he has his own like little naturalist drawings that are, about the caliber of like a 9-year-old. But so you can tell he's trying. Yeah, it is.
His little drawing of the seal and everything.
Yeah, rawr.
It's so cute. That kid is so smart.
Yeah, and that the two of them have, time to go over, naturalist stuff. And he's like, well, what is this? It just looks like a stick. And he's like, well, that's a stick insect. And, they do a little bit of, a little info dump that you don't notice because you only think that it's in service of what's going on right now, not realizing they're laying groundwork for a plot point at the climax of the movie.
Exactly. Like, and you see how Maturin, in spite of not being, a part of this institution, is still like definitely able to contribute because Aubrey is able to use that knowledge from Maturin to...
Yeah, he's traditional, but he's open-minded still.
Yes.
It isn't like ossified to like, well, this is just the way things are done.
Yes.
It is, he's still open to new ideas.
Yeah, like compare him to the captain of the ship in The Terror, where it's like...
Right, yeah.
Because Jared Harris, one of my favorite actors of all time, he's the captain of the one ship, and then there's the other one who makes kind of the shitty decisions that leads them to their...
Yeah, Jared Harris is the middle child no one listens to in The Terror.
He's so good in that show. I love him so much. God, like now I want to rewatch The Terror because that show like fucking ruled.
But yeah, he takes on new information and he adapts to do what is most advantageous. Yes. Rather than just being like, nope, this is the way things are and we're going to do it my way.
Yep.
Because this is the way we've always done it. And yeah, that is kind of the point where, the narratives of Master and Commander versus The Terror, part ways. One is, we're gonna be clever and resourceful, and we're gonna find ways to, mitigate this problem rather than being like, we're just gonna do what we've always done.
Right, because I remember like it's coming back to me like in The Terror, like Jared Harris's character is like, we should really do this because otherwise we're gonna be fucked, and like the other captain's like, nah, we're gonna, because he's the other guy's the head of the expedition, he's like, nah, we're gonna keep doing this. Yeah,
he's saying it won't work, we're just gonna have to wait it out until conditions get better, and they're like, fuck the conditions, we're Britain.
It really is a nice like contrast to like the relatively positive portrayal in Master and Commander, and that is an element which makes the film feel sort of old-fashioned. That this isn't a film which is necessarily going to spend a lot of time like kind of questioning these institutions. It's going to depict it honestly, and this isn't a sanitized portrait of naval life at the time, because you watch the movie and you're like, you just keep thinking like, God, it would fucking suck to be on that boat. That was something, because my dad also really liked this movie. I used to watch it with him, and we would just talk about like, God, can you imagine just being on that goddamn boat? Like how much that would suck.
Yeah, I mean, like even in My Game of Traveler, everyone has their own stateroom. Like that is unbelievable luxury. And there's only a half a dozen of them too. Also,
every time I watch any kind of movie in this sort of environment, which is like a largely masculine environment, often military, I just think, and I laugh, like, how would Tim respond to being in this environment? Not well.
Old keel-hauled Tim. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking that like the other night I was watching the original Manchurian Candidate, and I was just like, man, can you imagine Tim in North Korea? Like, just being like, what the fuck is the point of this shit?
Well,
this is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, in that regard, Torgo is my spirit animal. Hey, Torgo, taking the bags. Yeah, here I go, vroom.
Then the thing I love about Manchurian Candidate is a great film. The premise that it's built on somewhat doesn't hold up because that's not really how brainwashing works.
Right, yeah, well...
You actually can't make someone do, like...
You can't make them into a sleeper agent. You can only just be like, someone needs to do something about all these drag shows. And then, let some gun nut do the rest of the work for you.
Yeah, they've kind of moved from, like, straight brainwashing to, like, mere stochastic terrorism, which is, and they've credit where it's due. They've done all right with it so far.
Right, yeah. It's like, I don't need, one guy. I just need a guy.
Yeah.
Just could be anyone. Doesn't matter. Like, they're expendable anyway.
Yeah. But, I mean, I was, like, the whole thing about, like, Manchurian Candidate, like, that idea that you could brainwash like, just an average American soldier, like a patriotic guy, into doing things antithetical to his very being. Like, it doesn't necessarily hold up but it doesn't matter because the movie's still great. But I always think about it because what inspired the story was these American POWs, they were held by the North Koreans, and then they came back, and they were basically saying things that reflected the opinions of their captors. Like, they were saying communist stuff.
Yeah, North Korea's best Korea.
Right. And the Americans, because, this was the 50s, they were like, well, like, why would any red-blooded American say things that were sympathetic to communism? Obviously, they did something to their brains.
They nailed a coin on top of them.
And, it didn't even occur to them that maybe, like, maybe the North Koreans weren't just, like, alien monsters. I mean, I'm sure, like, these soldiers were subjected to, communist propaganda. Like, they definitely got, like, the re-education and everything. But, I mean, that's not brainwashing. It's like making an argument to someone, and sometimes it's quite convincing. Right,
yeah. So I have some literature for you.
You don't need to sell me, Tim. I'm already a sleeper agent.
Yeah. Now, sleeper agents are supposed to be effective, but that's beside the point.
The joke's on them. I'm actually a triple agent.
Oh, okay. You could barely be a single agent. There's a lot of modern cynicism about the motives of what went on at this time. Master and Commander, it's men losing their lives, pressed into service of the British Navy, the Empire, just to fucking murder Frenchmen, just because. But
and the English and the French normally got along so well too.
I know. There's 100 years that they got along. But Russell Crowe does make the point towards the end when they have their final confrontation with Acheron about Acheron, about we're far from England, we're on the far side of the world. He turns to the camera when he says it. I don't know why they left that in. But he's like, we're far from England, but here the ship is England. And you realize that is what they're fighting for. They're fighting for England because Napoleon is just, rolling all over Europe. Able to do whatever he wants. And if they don't fight back, then there isn't going to be a British Isle anymore. That's going to be, they're going to all be speaking French and taking hour-long lunches and drinking coffee.
By the way, if you want to learn more about...
And burning their cities down when their pension, the age of retirement gets moved back 24 months.
As they should.
Right, yeah. Not that I'm complaining. But he does make the point that, we are fighting for England. There was something that they were actually fighting for rather than just being like, there's a ship, we're going to take it.
You want to call that raggedy-ass Macron your king?
There you go.
Sorry, but you were making a point about the French?
No, I was making a point that it's easy to be cynical about the motives of what was going on at the time, but the captain does make a speech explaining what they're fighting for, and that they're fighting for England, and that even if they're far from home, the ship is England to them, and to fight accordingly. It's a very motivational speech. It would be like in Traveler, if someone had the leadership skill, then they got like an effect of, I don't know, like 2 or 3, and they're able to pass out bonus dice to all their officers. So then they did a better job. Like they give one to Lord Littlekid, who fucking tears shit up, and you love to see it. Because it follows that same path of, they're at their lowest at the beginning of the movie, then at the end you get to see them triumph. They capture the Algernon. They capture flowers for Algernon.
The Acheron, as they call it on the British side.
Right, yeah. They capture the Acheron. The little kid who lost an arm, proves himself in battle, which is amazing to see. This little kid, commanding a crew, shooting cannons into the midship of the opposing vessel. You're like, fuck yeah, kid, you get him.
Yeah, and it's wild too because this movie also depicts that world of class division.
Yeah, where
there are these definite strata of the people on the ship. There are people who, these groups these people always eat together, sleep together, everything. And there's no real mixing. Right. And so you have the spectacle of a kid who looks like he's 12 or 13, commanding much older men simply because he's a lord. And I think the way that this worked is that if you had an officer candidate, some kid with a title who you thought might make it in a naval career, you put him on a fucking boat, didn't matter if he was 12 years old, they'll make a man out of him.
Right, yeah. If in your first career in Traveler, if you have a high social skill, you get an advantage to being accepted into, as a naval officer. That's just the way the world is. Right, and that stratification is very interesting because it's another way in which this world is fairly alien to our own. Especially, in America, we like to pretend that there's no social stratification. There absolutely is, but we don't put on uniforms and it's kind of
touch our
blurred.
forelocks about it.
Right. Yeah.
But speaking of officers and being successful or maybe unsuccessful. We should talk about the character of Hallam, the tragic character at the center
the one
of
who's
story.
he's not suited to a leadership role. That's he's smart, but he's timid and he's lacking in leadership. You know that he's going to fail his survival check for his career in the Navy.
And I kind of I relate way too much to this character because, there are aspirational characters in the movie, Aubrey Maturin, all these effective officers. But, what about the guy who really kind of just wants to be liked and doesn't really have the spine to speak up for himself, even though he has the authority on his side? Even when he's blatantly disrespected by men he outranks, he can't bring himself to do anything about it. And it's sad. Yeah.
It's sad too when they're all having a shout along on deck and then he joins in. He's actually got a lovely singing voice and everyone's like, what's this poofter up to?
Oh, it's terrible. It takes you right back to elementary school.
Yeah. It's I'm sorry for joining in your fucking song, asshole.
And I think that's one of the most primal human motivations because we are social creatures and so much of our lives and mental health depend on social connections. And to be ostracized or to be
Right.
like cut out from the group in any way is like, and I know like this is I'm speaking about it from my perspective as someone who understands like that kind of anxiety, but
Right.
I think it affects most people who aren't just like straight up sociopaths. Like we all want to be accepted and we all want to fit in.
Yeah.
And to see someone just being cut out so blatantly is heart-wrenching.
Just the crew. Yeah, the crew, more than not liking him, the crew doesn't respect him, and
Yes.
that's really, his downfall is that he can't command any kind of respect from the people or from the men that he ostensibly commands.
Yeah, and they point out, in his conversation later with the captain, because Aubrey's like, oh, what, you're like 25, 26? And he's like, oh, I'll be 30 next July or whatever. And it's like he's 30 and still a midshipman. And there are...
And he points out, he's like, oh, so you failed your, like, advancement twice.
Yeah, that's tough.
He's a regular rimmer.
And this was a thing that I also liked in another favorite
Red
show
Dwarf.
of mine, Star Trek The Next Generation. The episodes which focused on those who didn't quite fit into Starfleet.
Yeah.
Like those always made for very interesting, like your Reginald Barclays or whatever.
Or what
because
the alternate timeline one where Picard becomes like a science officer.
Oh yeah,
Just a sad sack.
he's like wearing the blue uniform with just the two pips, and he's like, wait a minute, like what is my rank on the ship again? Yeah, because you're, most of the time when you're on the Enterprise, like the flagship of Starfleet with like the most elite and competent officers possible. And then kind of the struggles of, people who aren't quite cutting it in that milieu. Like it really does like cause you anxiety.
Remind me of work, yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, oh God, that must suck.
Yeah, and there is after because I like that you can figure out what he's going through and what he's going to do when Holland is on the with the rear deck of the ship, and he picks up a cannonball, and he just kind of like says some nice pleasantries to the guy on the watch, and then he throws himself overboard. And the
this
epilogue,
is such a wonderful moment for this actor too. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really wanted to point it out. Like he has that because he's spent a lot of time reacting to his maltreatment by the other members of the crew. Like he's literally having a panic attack shortly before.
Right, yeah, because he
his
has to
death
sort of
scene.
run the gauntlet of all the crew being like saluting him sarcastically.
Oh God, like you just cringe seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like trying to be a school teacher or something.
Oh yeah,
Just
like that's
everyone
terrifying.
hates you. Yeah,
Yeah.
You're like, just fuck me for trying to teach you about science.
Yeah, but then the moment when he decides that there's only one thing left for me to do. It's the only thing I can do at this point. And the way that
He's not cut out for it.
yeah, and then the aura of peace that he has. This actor is Lee Ingleby, and this is a really memorable role and a great character. But just the way that, and this happens with people who are suicidal a lot of the time when they finally decide to do it. People who know them will comment like, yeah, like he seems so upbeat, like right before he died.
Yeah, because it's finally over. Like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, which is horrible to talk
Podcast
about.
gets a lot easier. Yeah.
I mean, it's awful to talk about, but to put yourself in the mind of someone going through this, it's like, yeah, like when you finally see a way out and there's clarity. And where there is clarity, there is no choice. And where there is choice, there is misery. Check out our head episode.
Yeah, and what?
I'm sorry, but I cut you off
no.
because I just wanted to call it the actor because he's great.
Right, yeah. Fear accompanies the possibility of death. Calmness shepherds its certainty.
Yeah.
I love hanging with you, man. That's from the first season of Farscape.
Oh, hey, cool.
Yeah. And it is also, touching and tragic, the, epilogue that, that Russell Crowe's captain gives, after a guy throws himself overboard, is that he says, not all of us become the men we thought we might be. So yeah, he
I
isn't
wouldn't know
just-
anything about that,
right?
Captain.
Yeah. Check out r/aftergifted.
Check out the other 160 or so episodes of this podcast.
Right. Yeah, and that's it shows that he is a caring and conscientious captain, although he does have to make a lot of difficult decisions. But he's like, yeah, I understand what these other men are going through. Like I appreciate them as people, even if they don't. It isn't that anyone is falling short of some measure. It is that people are trying their best to realize their full potential, and some fall short.
Yeah, and it's an interesting line that the movie walks, because I feel like if they took it too far in one direction, the movie could come off as incredibly reactionary. Like, oh, this guy's a fucking failure. Like, thank God he fucking jumped
because
overboard.
there's sympathy for them rather than sneering disdain.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the story tragic instead of cruel.
Right.
And we'll talk a little bit about how this movie has been framed as inherently conservative of some way. We'll get to that because we got a fun little bit about that.
Oh, great.
But the way that you're right, like, because it treats the character like sympathetically, and the circumstances which push Hallam into the role of Jonah are just
They're entirely not of his doing.
Right,
They're
because
capricious.
yeah, and it's a guy with a brain injury who is the one pushing the narrative that Hallam's the one who when he, and another great fucking scene that kind of gets it rolling is when they hit very bad weather and a mast breaks and is in the ocean, like still attached by ropes to the ship, but it's dragging. It's a sea anchor, and it's like,
Right.
okay, well, we're fucked because we have to cut it loose, except we lost one of our men overboard, and that's his only chance. Yes, that's his only chance to get back on board. But we have to cut this thing loose. And there's an exquisite musical theme over this scene. The scene of, the decision is made. They got to cut this thing loose. The man slowly being lost to the stormy waves, and his cries getting fainter and fainter. The reaction of his compatriots as they're cutting the ropes with an axe.
Yeah.
I thought that this musical theme was like a classical piece because and they do a great job with the soundtrack in this movie as well, because obviously there's a lot of period music in it. There's string music played by Aubrey Maturin together in duet. There are other classical, like, orchestral pieces. But I did not realize until literally today when I looked, I was like, who did do the music for this? It's an Australian musician called Iva Davis, who was part of a band called Icehouse, who did a couple of my favorite songs of the 80s, Crazy and Electric Blue is the other one. That's on the album Man of Colors, which is a great album if you love 80s music. And I was like, holy shit, it's that guy. Look up the video for Crazy, because it is absolutely the most magnificent mullet you've ever seen in your goddamn life. There is not one to equal it.
Crazy by whom?
Icehouse.
Icehouse.
Yes. Tim, you should do this hairstyle.
I don't
It would
I
rock.
don't think that's a good idea.
But yeah, and I think that the music which plays over this very sad scene with the sea anchor, like, I believe that is by the composer. For a long time, I thought it was a classical theme, and I was like, what is it? Is it because there's Bach and there's Mozart and there's
Right.
But it's not any of those. And I was like, damn, that is a really excellent way that they integrated the contemporary score with the period music. Like, it's seamless. And that it's really something. Like, everything about this movie is just sublime.
Right. It's very interesting. I am glad that you mentioned the sea anchor scene, because for better or worse, that's the only part of this movie that I remembered until I rewatched it. I mean, make of it what you will, but yeah, it's about you may and true to the way that I run my Traveler games is that it's about making tough decisions. It's saying like you have two choices and you can pick one.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. And this is if you were going to fault Russell Crowe's character at any point, is that he is single-mindedly determined about catching and capturing the Acheron. Yeah, because that is their mission. Like, that is the one thing that they're there to do. And they even point to it too, where it's like the scope of our mission was as far as Brazil. Like, we are well past Brazil at this point. They're rounding Cape Horn at that point.
Yes, and that's the moment where Aubrey's ambition gets the better of him a little bit, and there are all these consequences which play out as a result. They're pushing against really bad weather. They're pushing the ship to its absolute limits. Right. And they're going beyond what they were ordered to do because he is so single-minded about, catching this sinister French ship.
And that is unfortunate because they've had some really cunning plans before then. Like, they set up a decoy. They escaped through a fog. They were able to kind of get the drop on the Acheron. And if only they can just keep pursuing them through this, atrocious weather, through the storms of Cape Horn, then they've got them. And they just can't manage it. Their mast breaks. They lose, one of the well-liked, crewmen overboard, and they've got to cut him loose. And I remember that because it's like, you have a difficult decision ahead of you. You have to either let the prize go or let this man die.
Yes.
And unfortunately, they kind of lose both of those things.
Yeah, and kind of the knock-on effects of that, of Aubrey's decision, are it's really compelling. And then also the this prize, the Acheron, there are a couple points where it's within their grasp, and Aubrey is forced to make a decision to not pursue it. Like, for example, when Maturin gets accidentally shot by one of the Marines who's aiming at an albatross.
Yeah.
Which I love because, like, and Paul Bettany is so good because anytime he's interacting with, like, the natural world, just the look of wonder on his face and enchantment, and he just desperately wants to get a look at this bird. And meanwhile, the Marine has got his gun, he's like, it's my bird, and he's like, and that's the, of course, like, the first instinct for most of these guys is like, yeah, fucking kill it.
And be like, I bet I can shoot that bird.
Exactly. And then he accidentally shoots the ship's doctor, which is like, uh-oh. And
right, yeah.
Aubrey is forced to decide, like, okay, like, my best friend is going to fucking die if he doesn't get the surgery.
Well, they've got a surgeon, a butcher who can read.
Yeah, like the doctor's assistant Higgins, who is like, I'll take a crack at it. I got to look at some of Maturin's books before I do it. He's like looking at anatomy texts and like drinking.
Yeah, and like doing it at sea probably isn't gonna help.
Yeah, and they hadn't. This was well before President Grover Cleveland had surgery at sea to remove a cancerous tumor from his jaw. Like, they had to do it in secret because they're like, well, we don't want people to know the president is like, got a fucking cancerous growth. There's a whole book about that, and it's fascinating. But this is 1805. They, they're like, well, I don't know. Like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, there's a lot of uncharted waters here, where it's like, give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Yes.
And it's trying to strategically make the best of your limited resources.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
And it's also one of the things which points up the relationship between these two men and what makes it truly like a memorable friendship. And that's I love male friendships like this in media. And I'm not going to say that cursed phrase.
Best leave it alone. Just normalize it. You don't have to come up with a goofy word for it.
Right.
Just be like, this man is my friend.
Right, because knowing that that's something which in our in our fascinating modern age that we live in, which a lot of men struggle with. Like, men are very isolated. They don't have close friends, and they're lacking that emotional connection. And to see it embodied in this movie is like really wonderful. And I think that's why these characters are also so durable. I mean, like I said, I'm too stupid to read the books, but people really, really, really love these Patrick O'Brian novels about Captain Jack Aubrey and Dr. Maturin, and it's because of that. I mean, it's like Holmes and Watson.
Yeah, there's a lot of camaraderie, not just between them, but I mean amongst the men on the ship, because they're just going through hell.
They're trauma bonded.
Sure, right.
Sorry, I'll take it to Tumblr.
Flippant phrase. Yeah, take it and leave it there. But yeah, because they're going through hell, and I mean, they just lost someone's lost a friend. You've seen someone die horribly. So you have to treasure those moments of camaraderie and friendship when you have them, because who knows, like, someone may go overboard, you might get attacked, so someone who's been your friend this entire time could, die in a raiding party.
Yeah. So, like, you could get promoted to...
You have to appreciate that time while you can.
You get promoted to second lieutenant and then just get immediately ventilated by Frenchmen.
Right, yeah, you could end up dying off screen after everything's been going so well, which is, again, what I love about character creation in Traveler. But I'll try to...
Tim, you don't have to stick exclusively to Traveler to get these things. I mean, like, they're embodied in movies like this one, which are very well made.
I watched this movie. I paid my debt. I'll try and inject Traveler into this episode like 100% less from now on. Now that we're already 100 minutes in. But what else? They stop at the Galapagos. So that's, again, like one of these highlights. Like if you were on a sailing vessel in uncharted waters, what better side quest than to go hit up the Galapagos, and you get to see some cool shit. It's not all just war and naval combat. You can actually do some fun things that aren't about that. Like, the men are playing cricket on the shore, and I think they're brewing like tequila. Yeah,
they get hold of some cactuses and chop them up and make some kind of very good grog.
Yeah, I forget what you make with cactus.
Cactus juice. I don't know. Yeah.
Cactus cooler. That's where it comes from.
Hell yeah! Oh, no wonder they were enjoying it so much, because that's just good.
Yeah.
I love cactus cooler.
Right. Okay. You heard it here first. And there's, again, like some back and forth. Like the Galapagos does end up being like this kind of like extra bonus, long rest period for them, because it was a place where they had, sailed past it. And then it's like, that ship's within sight. We can't stay. Now we have favorable conditions. No time for love, Dr. Jones. We got to go chase the ship. And then, later on, events change. It's like, all right, I bought you the damn couch. Like you can go back to the Galapagos.
Yes.
That Simpsons where Unky Herb buys Homer the vibrating chair.
Oh, right.
Right. So.
Yeah, so...
Then they fight the French and give them hell. That's good.
Yes. But the French have a trick or two up their own sleeves.
Yeah, those tricky French. Never trust a Frenchman. That's the takeaway from the movie.
Yeah, they're going to do tricky shit like pretend to be the ship's doctor.
Yeah, and he figures it out. And it's like, all right, well, time to go knock some heads. And that's the thing that is... out of step with, I think, a lot of media of its time, is that in every step it is a competent captain who comes up with a clever plan that works.
Yes.
It isn't like we get halfway through and everything falls apart and everyone's like, shit, now we got to do something else. It isn't like I'm the leader but I'm secretly like a coward or some shit like that. It's like, no, everything is what they say it is, and we work hard to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. Would that we lived in that world? Well,
and there is always going to be adversity, and then also like the door just cracked a little bit for a sequel, which may take 20 years to get percolating.
Right. Well, it's sailing around the ocean. It takes time.
But I want to talk about a little bit about the perception of this movie because this kind of groundswell of appreciation for it has been in the works for a long time. I mean, this movie was well reviewed when it came out, and it didn't lose money, but it wasn't the blockbuster that...
It wasn't the Lord of the Rings. Had it been any other year, maybe we might have had a chance.
Right. But as the years have gone on, I found a lot of people like myself who are like, dude, this movie is fucking sick, dude. It's so good. Like, you have to see it. Like, it's definitely been a little bit of a cult thing. And it seems to have reached critical mass with social media because as soon as I started being active on Twitter, you'd see people say like, Master and Commander, like, great film. Like, you gotta see it. And next thing you know, people are getting tattoos of the opening title screen.
Well, yeah, what a refreshing notion, the idea that your actions like have positive consequences.
Yeah, and recently there was a GQ article which is like, why do so many guys love Master and Commander? Of course, and this isn't fortunately
being a dad movie.
Well, fortunately this wasn't some like Kyle Smith bullshit where it's like, oh, like, women just don't understand Goodfellas because it's about dudes being bros with each other.
That discourse is so retarded.
It really is.
It's tragic.
In this case, it was like the GQ, even though GQ is a men's magazine, it's like, yes, there are like guys is gender neutral in this case because there are a lot of people who really love this movie.
Right.
But
yeah, like Jen isn't a guy.
No, I've tried and I've failed.
Yeah, I know. He couldn't cut it as a guy.
But yeah, a thing. Okay, so
the GQ article.
Well, the GQ article is like, fine. I'm sure I agree with most of it, but from slightly darker corners of
waters,
the media world, literally more than a decade ago, because this is from 2009. And I remember the first time I saw it because I was honestly a little bit triggered. The National Review, which is a magazine which my mom has read,
which has
for
no
a long
taste
time.
in media, yeah.
Every now and then they'll cover, popular entertainment. And in 2009, they had an article called the top 25 best conservative movies. And what do you know?
What's number one? Like Death Wish?
They start off with The Lives of Others.
Okay.
And the next film is The Incredibles.
Oh, the fucking Randian archetype. All right.
Hey, number 3, Metropolitan. Like, yeah, like 100%. Even though I really like Metropolitan. But hey, number 4, Tim,
it's
Forrest
my favorite
Gump.
kind of ice cream. Well, it's because it's all like gauzy nostalgia for whatever this imagined like non-existent America.
Well, get this. This is the I'll indulge me a little bit. This is the blurb for Forrest Gump. It won an Oscar for Best Picture, beating Pulp Fiction, a movie that's far more expressive of Hollywood's worldview, whatever the fuck that means. Tom Hanks,
the monoculture of Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah. Tom Hanks plays the title character, an amiable dunce who is far too smart to embrace the lethal values of the 1960s. The love of his life, wonderfully played by Robin Wright Penn, chooses a different path. She becomes a drug-addled hippie with disastrous results. Forrest's IQ may be room temperature, but he serves as an unexpected font of wisdom. Put him on a Whitman sampler, but Mama Gump's famous words about life being like a box of chocolates ring true.
That's a brain-dead review for a brain-dead character. That's fine. I do have to add, though, that Forrest Gump was also made by Hollywood, so I'm not really sure what point they're trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, it's the National Review. Like, they don't really think these things through to their
It's just like, does it feel right, or is it actually right? I don't know.
Now, it won't shock you that number 5 is 300.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most reactionary films I've ever seen, and one of the most repulsive, if I'm being
wouldn't
honest.
have expected that from Frank Miller, but that's just me.
This is going to upset you. Number 6, Groundhog Day.
What?
Yeah.
How? What's the blurb for that? I'm curious now.
Okay, this putative...
Small town, because he's from the city.
This putatively wacky comedy about Bill Murray as an obnoxious weatherman cursed to relive the same day over and over in a small Pennsylvania town, perhaps for eternity, is in fact a sophisticated commentary on the good and true. Theologians and philosophers across the ideological spectrum have embraced it. For the conservative, the moral of the tale is that redemption and meaning are derived not from indulging your authentic, quote-unquote, instincts and drives, but from striving to live up to external and timeless ideals. Murray begins the film as an irony-soaked narcissist, contemptuous of beauty, art, and commitment. His journey of self-discovery leads him to understand that the fads of modernity are no substitute for the permanent things. And that blurb is by one of the biggest dumbasses in punditry, Jonah Goldberg. So
I don't know who that is.
He's a fucking idiot.
Okay, well, wait, isn't like sneering narcissism and contempt for art, like, aren't those like conservative hallmarks though?
I mean, yeah,
walk the walk.
I've lived with these people and I still can't explain them to him. So, but right. I feel like we could spend a whole episode reading through this list.
The ability of doublethink.
But let me get to number 16.
Okay.
Which is Master and Commander. And here's what John J. Miller, whoever the fuck that is, says about Master and Commander from 2003.
Okay.
This naval adventure film starring Russell Crowe is based on the books of Patrick O'Brian. And here's what A.O. Scott of the New York Times said in his review. The Napoleonic Wars that followed the French Revolution gave birth, among other things, to British conservatism, and Master and Commander, making no concessions to modern egalitarian sensibilities, is among the most thoroughly and proudly conservative movies ever made. It imagines the HMS Surprise as a coherent society in which stability is underwritten by custom and every man knows his duty and his place. I would not have been surprised to see Edmund Burke's name in the credits. Okay, so John J. Miller didn't write anything about Master and Commander. He just lifted a quote by A.O. Scott and was like, oh yeah, it's a conservative movie. Lazy piece of shit.
He had someone else do his homework for him. Maybe he should try being best.
They cribbed it from the most one of the most hated publications by conservatives, the fucking New York Times.
Yeah.
I guess maybe, and I haven't read the A.O. Scott review, like maybe he was saying like, oh, this movie sucked because it was conservative. I have no idea. But, I mean, like we said, the movie is old-fashioned in a way. And you could do a conservative read of the film, but I feel like it's doing, like that would do the movie a disservice.
Conservatism seems to, like, say it believes one thing, but it sure doesn't really like express itself in its actual actions. I understand that like there is an appeal of, like I said, throughout the movie it is about a virtuous character who's always right, but it just doesn't bear itself out. I don't have the chops for discussing political commentary, but I don't see that same thing echoed in like the conservative body politic. I don't see people like taking on new information and then coming up with a better more prosperous solution. I just see cruelty and oppression of marginalized groups. Like these. I mean, mean what you say, like, say what you mean. Like, it doesn't even be coming across in like their actual actions. These sort of notions of doing the right thing and, being the better person for it. I don't see that happening. I see a lot of being tied to established power structures because those are the ones that have served you, and being and denigrating anyone who doesn't belong to that.
Well, and I mean, it's telling that they're focused on this. I mean, I guess I'd say John J. Miller of the NASA Review, but he, like I said, he just lifted A.O. Scott's words. this notion of a rosier time period where there were strict hierarchies and everyone knew their place, and floggings were dealt out, to miscreants, and it just worked out. And everybody just kind of like soldiered along in their very defined little roles. It's kind of like how the sort of the defining vision of, kind of like, like look at all those trad Twitter accounts where they're like, look at what we've lost, and they'll post like just a Madison Avenue vision of a 50s American family. Like, oh, like this is a picture from an advertisement of a nice, attractive white couple and their white children in their white suburb. Like, what have we lost? And I was like, okay, you know that this was a thing which was sold to the public. Like,
right, yeah.
Not that like nice white families didn't exist, but this is like an idealized version, and it was really like, it was put forward to kind of obscure like these other people who didn't like quite fit into the to the picture, because like beyond the borders of that advertisement are like like a fucking like restaurant under like Jim Crow laws where it's like, oh, you black people can't eat at this fucking lunch counter.
Right, yeah, you aren't getting Master and Commander from the the press gang crew's point of view.
Right. And I would be interested to see the conservative read of a character like Dr. Maturin. I mean, again, this fucking joker who contributed this listicle for the NRO, like, didn't even write his own blurb for the goddamn movie. So who knows what he thought? He's like, oh yeah, A.O. Scott said it was conservative.
Well, yeah, he's just coasting on, his laurels, I guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he was, born into what's the thing? He started on third and thought he hit a triple.
Wingnut welfare, they call it.
All right, yeah, there you go.
I mean, like, Jonah Goldberg wouldn't have a fucking job if his mom hadn't been like a, establishment ghoul.
Yeah, scum, all of them.
Yes.
I would also like to see, does anyone in reviewing Master and Commander on the conservative blogosphere, do they have anything to say about what the captain's steward, the guy who's just like
Killick.
Always grumbling? Yeah.
Oh god, that guy rules.
It's like I never caught a word, but he's always mad about something.
This movie is well worth watching with closed captioning.
Yeah.
And they did a great job on these.
Does just say like
too.
Welsh grumbling?
No, they'll get, and it's a really good way to pick up like a lot of these expressions and idioms of the time that are like, what the hell does that mean? But they become clearer with the subtitles. But yeah, like they translate Killick's grumbling, and it's always extremely funny.
I believe it, because
like when
a great bit of color.
Yeah, like the bit where like when those the two able-bodied seamen come in to tell the captain, like, hey, like, he saw the Acheron being built, and like I knocked up a model for you, and Aubrey's pleased, and he says, an extra ration of grog for our two friends here, and then Killick's just like, oh well, we were gonna toast with that stuff, like whatever, we'll just toast with wine, like it doesn't matter, like just always like this irritable commentary on like everything that the captain asked him to do. So I guess there are like two like slightly subversive characters in the ship. You got Maturin and then you got Killick, who are like kind of like the color commentary.
Yeah, because it's one thing to be like, I'm the captain, and I'll just, what I say goes, this is the plan now. And the other guy's like, well, I got to actually implement your fucking plan.
And, I'll say this. Like, this was a movie that I could watch with my dad, who was a... God love him. I loved my dad. My dad is great, but he was a Trump-loving conservative.
Yeah, he was just a weak-minded sycophant.
And a for real cold warrior. I mean, my dad was that old. He was Silent Generation, and he really believed in these ideals of like, America, like anti-communism and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't get it, and I'm sure he like would despair at my politics. But we watched this movie a few times ago. We watched it in the theater, in fact, and he loved it, and I loved it. And it's kind of a testament to the strength of this movie that it isn't just one thing to one person.
Well, yeah, because it, like I said, it's, you know, it doesn't have it has sympathy for weaker characters, not contempt for them.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, it's that compassion that's, you know, just been sort of squeezed out of the conservative mindset.
Yeah, because I'm sure that, like, over at the NRO, the read on Holland would be like, yeah, thank God he fucking killed himself, piece of shit.
Yeah, make room for a strong man.
Yeah.
Well, it's slowly turning into fascism anyway, so.
You'll like this. The last 3 films on the list. Oh, no, I'll give you the last 4 films on the list. 22, Brazil.
All right.
Yeah, like, which is
a crucial misreading, but sure.
Yeah, like, I don't know how, like, in light of the ending, I don't know how the real ending, not the, you know, the mega happy ending the studio made them staple on. Yeah, like, yeah, but the way they put it is terrorist bombings, national security scares, universal police surveillance, bureaucratic arrogance, a callous elite perversion of science, and government use of torture evoke the worst aspects of the modern megastate. Wow. That is hilarious 14 years
Guantanamo
later.
Bay, motherfuckers, come on.
This was only, what, like 6 years after
How diluted can one political philosophy be? Jeez.
Yeah. Oh, but
who do you think is torturing these people? Who's putting, you know, children crossing the border in cages?
Oh, but torture is good when we do it because we're righteous.
Right. Yeah.
Number 23, United 93.
Fuck you.
That's all that we need to say. 24, Team America World Police.
Well, I mean, you know, the South Park guys are libertarians.
Yeah,
so.
They are. I mean,
and wrong about a lot of things. So
yeah,
whatever.
I'll give them that one. But Team America is an extremely funny movie.
Probably, I don't know.
I saw it in the theater and I almost peed myself laughing.
Yeah.
Okay, number 25, Gran Torino, starring Clint Eastwood.
You know, that is about an old grizzled white guy who helps his community, so I'm going to disagree.
Well, I'm sure they like it because Clint Eastwood plays an old Polak who says slurs, like old-timey slurs.
Yeah, I think these are reviews by people who haven't seen the movie.
Oh God! And
I'm gonna go out on a limb.
Oh shit! Okay, well here's the last couple sentences of the blurb on it.
Yeah.
And again, like conflating Eastwood with his most immortal character, Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry blows away political correctness, takes on the bad guys, and turns a boy into the man in the process. He even encourages the cultural assimilation of immigrants. It feels so good, you knew the Academy would ignore it. Okay,
just climbing onto that cross. Persecution fetish.
Guess who wrote that blurb?
Who wrote that blurb?
Andrew Breitbart. Rest in piss, bitch.
I know the name, but I don't know who that asshole is. Just as well.
He founded...
You don't need to explain it to me. I don't care.
Well, for people who want to know, who are also listening to this, he founded, of course, the detestable outlet Breitbart.com.
Like that I know, yeah.
And then he fucking died because his heart exploded because he was a fucking cocaine addict, because all of these people are just absolutely despicable hypocrites.
Yeah, I mean, I guess hypocrisy does kind of seem to be the unifying theme here, and that, like, they're all about, like, these are all characters who are, like, helping other people and, I don't know, being magnanimous, but, like, I do not ever see that in conservative actions. It always is just some matter of just oppression.
Okay,
by any other word. This
is fully brain dead because there are some honorable mentions. One of which is Serenity.
whatever.
Like, okay, and then yeah, literally
There's
under...
much better sci-fi to be
to be had.
To be had, yes.
Yeah, but okay, so and this is literally under the heading 25 more great conservative movies. One of them is An American Carol, which is
I don't.
Okay, it's one of the guys who did like Airplane and Naked Gun. Like he took a big conservative heel turn, and then he made this like parody movie of like Michael Moore and stuff like that, which my dad and a friend of his paid to see in the theater. And when he came back and I asked him like, how was it? He was like, ugh. Like, I think that movie is considered pretty much like a dismal failure. So they're just like, there isn't even a pretense to like quality in this list at this point. It's like, oh, it's a conservative movie. Watch it. It's great.
Right. Yeah. Not because it's good. Watch it because it's conservative.
Yeah. Well, so that is our episode about one of the great conservative films, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World.
I mean, I shouldn't let like a poisonous political philosophy spoil what's otherwise a good movie, because I mean I don't see conservative like ideals in that. I mean, I see supposed conservative ideals, but nothing that is actually acted on. I don't see people helping their community or lifting others up.
Well, I see like I feel like that's and there obviously with any piece of media or art there are multiple readings that you could do, and you can force this into like kind of a conservative box, but I think it's missing a lot of other really good aspects of the film. Like, for example, like the compassion with which the character of Hallam is treated is like a tragic figure and not like the Jonah despised by the crew.
Yeah, I mean, if you filter out enough of things that you disagree with, then yeah, you could see it as a conservative movie. Yeah. But I mean, that is also a conservative hallmark, isn't it?
But it does kind of fit that a movie where...
Disappearing things that you don't like.
It does kind of fit that a movie in which literal children are forced into warfare would appeal to conservatives.
Or, just working in an abattoir and then getting married at 12.
Or, dying of preventable illness at a young age.
Right, yeah. Well.
Yeah. In service of empire. Yeah, so,
I guess, yeah, and there weren't any gays in this, so that's also very conservative.
Right, you have to go to the Terror for that.
Right.
Boy, that was a fraught moment when I was watching that show with my dad, and I figured out, and I was like, oh, great, there's gay sex in it. Please don't let my dad blow up about this.
Get the infinite patience and tolerance of an old conservative man.
He grumbled a little bit, but I think he knew not to.
But when they realized he was the villain, it's like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, the villain's one of those queers, so.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he gets torn apart by a bear creature at the end. So.
Yep.
Just as God intended.
Get split by a bear.
In the Navy.
What the hell are you talking about? We've gone so far off the rails.
Well, Tim, do you have anything else you would like to say about Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World?
Yeah, but we've kind of done the rest of it to death, so.
Oh, well, I guess you don't. In the Navy, you can hang out with your friends in the Navy. I don't know. You got a finisher? Because otherwise I'm going to start singing Gilbert and Sullivan again.
Jeez.
A British tar is a soaring soul, as free as a mountain bird. Come on, Tim, join me.
And we killed the French for the United Kingdom, 'cause I got me a bird back home.